Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Mark Henry, and today we're going to be talking about Open-Audit 2.1.1, covering some of the basic install requirements, and then discussing the top 10 features and functions that really make it just an absolutely outstanding device discovery and auditing solution. A little bit of background for us and general housekeeping before we get started. So everyone in the session today is on mute. So if you have a question, if you need some help, please use the GoToWebinar's chat. So I'll be keeping an eye on the chat pane. So if you have any questions during the presentation, just type them into the chat window. We will be recording today's session and making the recording available to all attendees. So if you want to grab a copy, we'll be sending out an email later today for that. We will have a Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. And what we'll do is when we get the presentation done, we'll stop the recording. That way, if you're a little shy, you don't want your voice recorded, you don't want your question recorded, that's fine. We'll turn the recording off. We'll open the floor for a general Q&A session on Open-Audit, answer any questions you have, and you're welcome to use a microphone for that, or again, you can use the chat window in the GoToMeeting panel and ask a question. Perfectly fine. So topics for today. So we're going to talk about the difference in licensing, the open source community edition to the commercial, professional, and enterprise versions. So we'll cover the different features and functionalities available at each of those licensing levels. We're going to talk about deployment and hosting options. So how can you deploy it? What each of the different licensing levels are really meant for as far as sizes of implementation. We'll also talk about server sizing. So how big a server do you need for different levels of audits, right? We're going to talk about discovery and auditing troubleshooting. So it's just going to be a very basic overview of troubleshooting for Open-Audit. And then finally, we're going to the top 10 features that Augmantix clients tell us are the things that really drive them to select Open-Audit. So I have the privilege of being a pre-sales engineer as well as a support engineer for Augmantix. I talk to anywhere from 20 to 30 different customers every week here in our North American office, and the things that we hear over and over. We're going to touch on those features, the things that people say, this is why we chose Open-Audit, this is what drove us to that selection, this is why we selected your product line. So we'll touch on those features. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat pane. So just a few useful references for everyone. For those of you who haven't noticed, I did upload a copy of the PowerPoint to the handouts pane, the GoToWebinar handouts pane, so you can download today's PowerPoint. We'll also make today's presentation available as both a recorded video that you can view or download, and we'll make the PowerPoint available as a PDF file. So you'll have all of these references, you'll have all of these links that you see today. All of these will be available for you post presentation. So don't worry about trying to do a screen scrape or do a screen capture or anything. You can get all of these yourself after the presentation. So let's talk about the differences in licensing levels. So what I've done is I've just thrown together just a quick little chart here. We've broken out the concept of community. So community equals or includes these 6 high-end features. So it's general network discovery, device and software auditing, configuration change detection and reporting, hardware warranty status, inventory management, and of course custom field development as well. You can also add into that the ability to create and edit your own queries and summaries. And there's a whole bunch of background supporting pieces in there. The idea of organizations and users and locations. So lots of good functionality there in the community edition. The next level, stepping out of the free and open source piece and into our first level of commercial licensing, is the professional edition. The professional edition adds or builds on community, gives you interactive dashboards, geographical maps, the ability to export devices individually or as groups of devices. It also gives you the ability to schedule tasks. And really, that's my highlight, and that's the thing that we really hear from the most customers as being the big piece for professional, is a concept that you can schedule repetitive things like device discoveries, the running of baselines, the creation and emailing of reports, and you can schedule all that stuff to happen after hours, late at night, weekends, once a month, once every other month, however often you want to do it, and get that stuff taken care of and get it happening without having to open up Open-Audit or mess around with cron jobs and try to figure those out and try to get things scripted. The next level of Open is the Enterprise Edition. And in the Enterprise Edition, we add in a series of new features. Again, these build on top of both professional and community. So with Enterprise Edition, you get the ability to scale to very large sizes. We have customers with deployments in the hundreds of thousands of devices. And the way they're doing that is they're deploying what we call Open-Audit collectors, whether that's broken up geographically or just logically across their network. We have a couple of clients now who are deploying collectors inside of like PCI DSS DMZs to make use of different topology networks, so they don't have to try to scan into that DMZ zone. They can audit locally and then push the results out. So you've got high scale, high availability. We also add in file and folder auditing, the idea that you can audit an individual file for changes, or you can audit an entire folder, and you can do that whether it's on a Windows or a Linux system. Baselines, which are a lightweight configuration monitor, so you can monitor NetStat ports, local user accounts, or software changes. And then also the idea of configurable role-based access control. So we introduced RBAC in the professional edition, but that's predefined. You only have, I think it's 5 roles defined in the professional license level. At the enterprise license level, you start with those 5 roles. You can modify them. You can add additional roles in. And that also includes the ability to do your authentication through LDAP. So it's a huge benefit there, right? You can get centralized authentication, and then you can get all of your role-based control handled down at the product level. We also, in the Enterprise Edition, include in a RESTful API. So you can actually just do an API call. You receive JSON format coming back. You can use any of the built-in reports, queries, or summaries and return the results from any of those back in JSON format as part of an API call. And of course, you can write your own queries, your own summaries as well, and call those, or just drill into an individual device and pull information via the API. We have a lot of customers now actually licensing Open-Audit Enterprise and using the RESTful API. So they're using Open-Audit Enterprise as the discovery engine, and then they're using the RESTful API to push new devices into a CMDB like ServiceNow. Huge savings on licensing different types of discovery engines for some of those really high-end CMDB systems. All right. So deployment considerations. So depending on which level of Open-Audit really drives what your thought process is and also what your scalability are. So the Open-Audit Community Edition is really designed for the small business network, right? It's someone who needs to run an audit today, but they don't necessarily need to do one every week or every month. It might be a one-time requirement. It might just be for an audit. Maybe they're going through the SAS 70 SOC 1 or SOC 2, and they just want to do a one-time audit. They might be doing their PCI DSS compliance review. They just want to get a snapshot of their network, down and dirty, quick. It's a small network, not a lot of complexity to it. And that's really where Open-Audit Community shines. When you start scaling up in the size of the business, though, and you start looking at having larger, more complex LANs, multiple DMZ zones inside there, maybe multiple LANs stretched out, maybe either logically across different floors, different sections of your business, maybe having more of a WAN layout across several different buildings that are tied together. even across several different time zones or geographic locations. Then you start talking about Open-Audit Professional, where you can align Open-Audit Professional, configure it and configure your network so that that server can see all of these different LANs, be able to reach out, be able to audit these, be able to create discoveries and then schedule them to run repetitively over time, maybe on a daily basis, maybe on a weekly schedule or a monthly schedule. We even have clients in the energy industry using Open-Audit to do some of their compliance reviews and wanting to run scans of their networks and their networking devices every hour. So completely doable. The concept with Professional, again, a lot of custom features that are in there, but really the ability to be able to schedule tasks, schedule your discoveries, schedule the running of things like reports, and then have the results of those sent along to whoever needs to get those pieces. Another option for deployment, if you're looking at the Enterprise Edition, generally the concept with the Enterprise Edition, in addition to the additional features you get, is the concept that you can deploy what are called collectors. A collector really is nothing more than a remote Open-Audit server where its role is to really just handle auditing a local LAN, a local network. That collector, represented here by these the little disks, these collectors report back to a master server or an Open-Audit server. Takes direction from the Open-Audit server. All of your interactivity, all of your users interact directly with that primary Open-Audit server at the top level. All of your credentials are centrally located. They're only sent down to the collectors when they need to be used to run an audit. And what that does is it really gives you a central oversight. When we talked about the Professional Edition a moment ago, we do have a lot of clients who deploy multiple Open-Audit Professional servers across their network. The challenge is that they're all standalone pieces. They all have their own databases. They all have their own interfaces. You might have to log into multiple servers if you have to have a distributed layout. With Open-Audit Enterprise, you have one management interface to log into, one location for all of your credentials, one location for all of your scheduling and your subnet scans, one location for your database. And then Open-Audit Enterprise server then communicates down to the collectors and gives them instructions on what to do and when to do it and how to do it, and then pulls that information back from the collectors and manages and maintains everything from that single server location. So if you're looking at a very large deployment or a very complex deployment, it doesn't necessarily have to be a lot of devices. We've had clients with multiple air gap networks, or DMZ zones, PCI DSS zones, HIPAA high-tech requirements, where they've deployed multiple collectors, Open-Audit collectors within those various areas, had them run the scans locally, and then have them return the results of those back up to one central database. So they maintain a single pane of glass at that one location level, at that one server level, and they can see everything across their entire network. So architecture-wise, several different options that are there. So what does that look like? Well, to start off with, you can install Open-Audit on either a Windows or a Linux server. If you're running Enterprise and you're going to run multiple collectors, they can be different operating systems. So you might have one collector that's running Windows and another one running Linux, and they're both reporting up to a Open-Audit Enterprise server that could be either Windows or Linux. It doesn't matter. So you can mix and match if you want to. There really are no differences in the audit capabilities. Open-Audit running on a Windows server versus running on a Linux server, they both find, audit, and pull back the same information. Strangely enough, if you run Open-Audit on a Linux server, discovering Windows machines, that discovery will actually run slightly faster than if you did an install on a Windows server auditing Windows machines. So that's just a little bit of a tidbit there. It's only about a 5 to 10% time difference between those two. But if you're doing a large scale, if you're doing 5, 8, 10,000 devices and you're trying to do them in a small amount of time, it might be worthwhile considering doing a Linux deployment rather than a Windows deployment, especially if you're auditing, again, Windows machines. The database that's installed with Open-Audit will differ depending on the operating system that you're installing it on. So if you're installing Open-Audit on a Linux machine, Linux version 6 or less, or on a Windows machine, you're going to get the MySQL database. If you're installing Open-Audit on a Linux machine of Linux 7, so RHEL version 7 or higher, it's going to install MariaDB. So that's all handled by the Open-Audit installer. You don't have to make any selections. You don't have to pick anything. If you're doing a Linux install, it does need internet access so they can pull down the packages it needs. If you're doing a Windows install, you will need to manually install Nmap first, and then just run the installer, and the Windows installer will take care of everything for you. So we a couple of the questions we often get is, how big a server do I need? How big a server do I have to have? And really what people are asking for is, do they have to have dedicated hardware? Open-Audit absolutely can run on a dedicated piece of iron if you want to. It also runs very, very well on a virtual machine, right? So whether you want to virtualize it or whether you want to do a hard piece of iron install, totally up to you. The resources that you give Open-Audit are really going to depend on how many audits you want to run simultaneously, the total number of devices being audited, and how often you're running the audits. So we had a client come to us the other day and said that they wanted to be able to do an audit of about 50,000 devices, and they wanted to do it every 24 hours. And so we recommended to them an install on a bare bones piece of equipment, running a Linux server with 24 CPUs, 64 gigs of RAM, and about 500 gigabytes of storage space on it. And that's it's completing those 50,000 devices every 12 hours. So it's working, it's handling the load very well. A lot of what drives how many audits can run simultaneously are kind of twofold. Number one is the amount of RAM the machine has. Number two is the total number of audits that you're running. So you're much better running audits on smaller subnets, running multiple audits simultaneously on small subnets, than you are running one big large audit on something like a /16. And the reason for that is that each audit that you run is running as a singleton. It's running in a serial standpoint, one IP address at a time. But if you run two audits side by side, each of them have their own memory space. And so you end up with the concept of being multi-threaded, although it's not traditionally multi-threaded. By running multiple audits side by side, each one runs in its own memory space. And as long as you have a good amount of RAM available to it, those will run very, very quickly. So a key consideration here, thought process, if you're running something smaller, let's say 10,000 devices, you could easily get away with a device with 80 gigabytes of hard drive space, between 4 and 6 CPU, and 6 to 8 gigs of RAM. So that's very easy to be done as a virtual machine. And whether you do that, you try to accomplish all of that, let's say over the weekend, or if you, as we would recommend, spread that out, and every evening you do 2,000 devices a night, Monday through Friday, and then create all of your reports over the weekend and have the system email those out. Recently, we've gotten a lot of questions about how many people it takes to run Open-Audit, and we actually discovered that a lot of those questions are being driven by some of the larger competitors to Open-Audit. Tend to require a lot of resources, whether that's a lot of programmers to customize the system, or a lot of people just to kind of touch it and make sure that it's working properly. Open-Audit actually, to our great benefit, doesn't require a lot of feeding and care. So one part-time employee or one full-time employee just working part-time, 4 to 6 hours a week for setuping implementation over a 2 to 3 week period for a 10,000 device implementation can get it done very easily. And then maybe an hour or 2 hours a week after that, just to kind of make sure that the audits are running, make sure the reports are being created, add any new subnets, do report edits, those types of things. So Open-Audit doesn't really require a whole lot in the way of physical hardware resources or dedicated manpower in order for it to run. I'd like to talk for a minute about discovery and audit troubleshooting. This is a key piece. In fact, I heard it earlier today in a call with another client where they downloaded, they'd installed Open-Audit, and they were trying to do a discovery on a subnet, and it wasn't getting back an awful lot of information. So one of the things that I wanted to do was touch on that today, introduce you to the concept of how an audit actually runs. So if you take a look at the flow chart, it actually starts in the top left-hand corner where an audit is actually submitted to the system. Open-Audit creates a network group if it's required. It kicks off Nmap, which we use Nmap as an open source network monitoring tool to reach out and figure out what ports and protocols are open at each IP address on that subnet. So as Nmap scans out, it looks to see if SNMP is open. If SNMP is open and it has a set of credentials, it'll scan using SNMP. Open-Audit supports SNMP version 1, version 2C, and version 3. But you have to have a good quality SNMP community string. It can be a read-only community string, but we strongly recommend that it not be restricted to by any type of branch or OID listing. After it gets done scanning via SNMP, it'll try to insert the device in the database, or it'll update an existing device. It'll then check to see if WMI is open. If WMI is open and it can find a set of Windows credentials at work, it'll actually audit that device again using WMI. So that way, if you're running a Windows machine where you have both SNMP and WMI configured, it can do both of those. If WMI is not open, or if it is open and it's completed that audit, it'll check to see if SSH is open, and then it'll actually connect via SSH and try to audit the device at that point. So there's a bit of a waterfall that it walks through in talking to each of the devices and taking a look at pieces. So looking at troubleshooting itself, again, this presentation, there's a copy of it in the handouts section of your GoToWebinar panel, so you can download today's presentation. It does have the a wrong file name for the PowerPoint. Just download it and you can rename it if you want to. We will also make this available as a PDF available for download off our website as well. So if you've installed Open-Audit, in fact, we recommend that after you install Open-Audit and you configure it following the advice on our wiki, that you increase your log level from 5 to 7, which is the most verbose, and then audit a single device. So we often end up talking to people who have tried to do an audit of a huge network, a /16, a /12, a /8, and the audits are taken forever because they're running as a singleton. It's running in one memory space in Apache, and it's taking a while, and they're not sure what's going on, and they're not getting good information. So instead, start by increasing your log level, go from 5 to 7, audit a single device, and then look at that device's discovery log for entries. And so let's just switch over for a moment directly to Open-Audit. And I'm just going to bring up a list of devices. And I'm just going to pick Thor as an example device. So let's say that you've spun up Open-Audit and you've run a single device discovery on one device. Over on the left-hand side of the screen, one of the options here is the discovery log. So if you open the discovery log, you can scroll through the discovery log. And the easiest thing I've found to do is to sort it by timestamp. I like to sort it in reverse order. So just keep an eye on your time there. This is reverse order. And then work backwards through this. And some of the things that you're looking for are for SSH. In this case, this is running a lot of SSH commands. They seem to be running well. As I continue moving back, I can see that we've got different pieces are coming in. It's received credentials. It's testing credentials. SNMP status is true. SSH status is true. So this is huge right here. So this is telling me which sets of credentials are working properly, or rather which ports and protocols are open. And then you can see that we're actually testing different credentials and which ones are working. So we had a question from James. James asked, which database table is the discovery log stored in? So good question, James. You can actually go to admin database list tables. So I'm going to do a little quickie here. I'm actually going to right click on list tables and hit open link in new tab. So this is just running inside my browser. So I don't like to open windows on top of each other and then have to hit back and hope everything reloads. So I can just make use of that nice little right click contextual menu that you get. Database table loads. And you can see these are each of the tables that are here. And we have a table broken out right there, discovery log. And even from here, you can actually drill into these pieces and see what's inside the table. You can export the table. You can export the table as CSV. You can export the table contents out into JSON format. You can export it out into SQL and a few other pieces that are there. And feel free, everyone. James just used the GoToMeeting chat window to pop a question. And so happy to answer any questions you have. Again, understand that everyone's on mute, so just type them in the chat window and we'll keep an eye on that. But the keys here, really, when you're troubleshooting, is to watch that discovery log. Make sure you set log level from 5 to 7, right? That's going to be the most verbose, and it's going to give you the information you need, right? The next thing to be able to do is to get over here and look at your open ports and protocols. Is SNMP open? Is SSH open? Is WMI open? And then see what credentials worked for it. If you have any questions at all, if you've got a support contract with us, email us at support@opmantic.com. Our team of support professionals here at our support office in North America would be happy to help you out. Get on the line with you, do a screen share, walk you through it, help you understand what you're seeing. If you don't have a support contract, post to the Opmantic Q&A board. You can also post to the Open-Audit.org. There's a forum on Open-Audit.org, and you can post there as well and have an interactive conversation. The product architect, Mark Unwin, often posts to the board and answers questions out there, as do many of the engineers here at Opmantic. All right. So now the piece that everyone has been waiting for the past 28 minutes, the top 10 features and functions. I'll be talking about the feature a bit. So we have a slide for each feature. We'll be talking about each feature, and then I'll flip over to Open-Audit and we'll actually take a look at it. So number 10, role-based access. So role-based access, again, the basics of role-based access are available in professional. We have 5 defined roles in professional. And once you get to enterprise, if you step up to Open-Audit Enterprise Edition, you start with those same 5 roles, but you can actually edit them, you can change them. So let's take a quick look at what that looks like. Manage roles, list roles. Now roles, of course, work together with 2 other pieces, users and organizations. So organizations, and we'll talk about organizations, they're actually one of our top 10 as well. Organizations are an organizational construct that both users and devices are assigned to. So it gives you a pyramid structure at your organization that define where a user falls for permissions, and it also defines where a device falls logically. So those 2 pieces roll into users, and of course roles themselves. So a user is assigned to an org and a role, and a device is assigned to an organization, and those pieces overlap. So you'll notice that we've actually got 6 types of users here. The one that's new is collector. Collector is only required in the Enterprise Edition. You actually create a collector role, specifically if you're going to be deploying Open-Audit Enterprise collectors out in the field. Otherwise, the other 5 are the generic roles that the system ships with. So that's admin, org admin, reporter, user, and agent. And when you drill into these, if we can take a look, let's say at reporter, you can see that we define an AD group for this, and then all of the different attributes. So it's the usual CRUD, create, read, update, delete. And of course, you can actually edit this yourself. So you can make changes to this if you want to, submit this back into the system, and of course that changes all of the access for each user that has this role assigned to them. Users can have more than one role assigned to them, and we do go with the most permissive. So if you have 2 or more roles assigned to an individual user, and one has create, read, update, and delete selected, but the second one only has read only, they will get all whichever is the most permissive that's assigned to them, not the least permissive. All right, number 9, custom fields. So the concept of being able to create an additional field that can be viewed, that can be displayed, that can be connected with a specific device. Really a huge requirement. We get asked the question all the time. And I'm just drilling down into an example device here. There we go. So this happens to be a Windows 2008 server. Over on the left-hand side under Summaries, I'm opening up fields. And you can see we have 4 different fields that are actually assigned to this server. And while we're talking about that, I'm going to open up the actual fields table. But in this case, I've got a field labeled barcode. So you can create a label for a field. In this case, I've labeled this field barcode. It's a simple text field. Underneath that, I have a field I've labeled end of life. That one is actually a date picker. So that'll use your browser's functionality to create a date picker. So it's a little calendar control. I have a drop-down list box. So this is a single select list box for those of you who are Windows programmers. You might also call this a pick list, but you can only pick one item. So you can create a pick list as well. And then I've just given it a 4th text field as well. Fields are defined under Manage Fields. So I've got that open now. And we can take a look at what that looks like to create a new field. So those are those 4 fields that you can see. Under group, you can see that some of them are for all devices and one is just for computers only. So you can give it a name. You can assign it to an organization. So if you have, again, an organization's a kind of a pyramid structure, you may have fields that only belong to the purchasing department. And so you only want those fields to be available to people who are also in that department or above that department to be able to see those, and also for devices that are assigned to that department. To different group IDs. This is a single select, so I can't multi-select different ones. But it's important to understand that things pack up. So for example, Windows workstations, Windows servers, and Windows computers. Servers and workstations are actually children of Windows computers. So if I picked Windows computers, I'd get all of those. The type, again, you're limited to var character, list, and date. And then if you select list, you would create a string of values that are comma separated. And you can pick and choose where you want it to go, either in system details or in a custom area. So your choice completely. The power of fields is, I think, underappreciated in many cases. The ability to create really targeted custom data receptacles. You can call these, you can sort by them, you can create queries with custom fields. You can use custom fields in any of your API calls if you have enterprise. So they're very powerful little things. Number 8, the ability to create and edit queries. Now, this is actually available also in all 3 levels of licensing. So this is available in community, professional, and enterprise. The ability to be able to come in and create any of these types of queries, reports, or summaries, and we'll talk about summaries in a minute. But the ability to create any of these and make them very, very custom. So, for example, I created this one to give me a list of all devices that are older than 3 years. There we go. And so I've actually created and defined which columns appear here, what order they appear in, how much information is shown here. So you can see that we have the purchase date, the type of device it is, the name, the date it was last seen, or the last date it was audited, the manufacturer, the model, description of the device, what function has been assigned to it, and then the name of the location. So we can actually get that broken down as well. So you can create your own queries very simply. Manage list queries. Again, I'm going to open that in a new tab. And while that's opening, I'm actually going to open up the tab for the next top 10, which is actually summaries as well. So I'm going to open up summaries. So if we look at queries, just taking a look at any one of these, I'm just going to click on the details button here for Acrobat. So Acrobat, the description here is Adobe Acrobat installations. Software contains Acrobat or Adobe Reader. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So you'll see that we have an organization ID, we have a name of the device, what menu category the report will appear in, whether it will be displayed or not in the menu. So you can actually turn that off. You have the description in the top right, and then you have a SQL statement. So all a query is a SQL statement. There's a specific format to it. It's actually very well documented in the Open-Audit Wiki as well. Please check that out, because we do use, rather than a single quote, we do use a backtick as the quoting system in here. But you can actually take a look at these. You can copy these out. This is how I learned to write queries, was to simply open up the existing queries, copy the SQL statement. I pasted it into a text editor of my choice. It could be TextEdit, it could be editor, could be BBEdit, whatever works for you. And then compare them. Take a look. How do these work? Break them down. Do a search on the different types of SQL commands, like, left join. Understand what these do, and it's pretty straightforward. Again, you can create custom queries in community, in professional, and in enterprise. If you have a support contract, if you have any questions, if you're running into trouble getting your SQL query to work, email it to us. Just copy the SQL statement from the window, email it to support@opmantic.com. We'd be happy to help you write a SQL query. Very simple, very straightforward to do. So one of the other things that we really, really like is the concept of being able to create summaries. So here's an example of a summary: operating system names. So I'm going to let that load, and we're going to flip back over here and look at number 7, to create and edit summaries. So summaries and queries are very much related. A query is a very, very detailed report that allows you to do joins on database tables. It allows you to apply filters. Pretty much any kind of a SQL statement you could run against MySQL or MariaDB can be done to create a query. A summary is much simpler in many ways, but it can also be more complex and robust. So for example, this is a summary. You'll notice that we have a top level breakdown by count. In this case, this happens to be operating system names. So we have Blackfin Linux embedded. We have one device for that. We've got 6 devices with CentOS release 6.9. And then lots of single digit entries that are in here. So if I wanted to drill into this CentOS 6.9 and I click on that, it's now going to drill into that and then give us a report that's very much like a query report. So we get a predetermined layout of columns. You can add additional columns to this, but you can't remove columns from it. Any columns you add to it have to refer only to the system table. So going over to Manage, Summaries, List Summaries, so that's the one that we're on. And let's take a look at operating system families so you can see what that looks like. So again, you have the menu category, whether it's displayed in the menu or not, what primary table you're working off of, the column. So you can add multiple columns. These are the primary column that drives the table. That's what drives the top level of the summary. And then extra columns. If I wanted to have additional columns appear on this screen, I could list them here in comma separated format. Again, they all have to be from the system table. I can't refer to other tables outside the system table. So I can add additional columns to that if I wanted to. Again, the power here with summaries is the concept that you can create this top level. I've seen these done for everything from processors, number of processors, processor count, processor family. You could do it for operating systems. You could do it for manufacturer. So you could break everything down. I just want to see a list of all my manufacturers and then be able to drill into, let's say, Hewlett-Packard and see exactly all the devices that were manufactured by Hewlett-Packard. So anything that's going to have a one-to-many concept behind it really benefits from being organized as a summary. You can of course do them as queries, but you lose the benefit of this top-level menu. All right, let's close those down. Go back to the PowerPoint. Number 6 in our top 10, managed software licensing. This is a gem as far as I'm concerned. This is really a key component, a piece of Open-Audit. It's one of the things that really attracted me as a user originally to Open-Audit. And it's one of the things that really attracted me to Opmantic when this position as a senior engineer here came open, is the idea that I can actually have a lightweight SAML system, software asset management, the ability to be able to come in, go manage licenses, list licenses, and be able to track license usage across my enterprise. So what I've done is I've just created a couple of example entries in here. You'll see, for example, that we're doing a check for MySQL 4. I told the system that we have 5, and it's found 1, and so it's highlighted in green. And then you'll see below that, I've said that we've licensed MySQL, that we have 3 copies of it, and it found 5, and so that's highlighted in red, showing me that I'm oversubscribed. I've used more licenses than I've told the system I have. And so we can drill into that. I can hit details. And so you can see the 5 machines at the bottom. And more importantly, it actually reports back the software version to me. So it's telling me all the different versions of software and subversion numbers for each of these implementations. So I've got that information available to me as well as a user. It's very, very easy to add new licenses to this, to edit pieces that are in there. The workflow is really very standard. Run your audit. Find one device that you know that has the software on it that you're looking for. Look through the list of installed software and find the file that you want to use as kind of the key file, the file that you're going to look for, the file that you're going to use to represent that piece of software and that would be installed on each machine where a license would be expended. And then you just create a license entry in Open-Audit for it. Right? As long as you already have data in the database, it'll count everything up right away and let you know what's going on. Quick note there, software keys are managed separately from software licenses. So there's a link down here on information about software keys and how you can pull up your software key lists. Number 5, geographic mapping. So geographic mapping actually takes 2 components. The first is the concept of locations. So before you can create a map, an actual geographic Google map of where all your devices are located, you first define locations. And so, for example, you can see we have 3 locations defined here. We have Gold Coast office in Australia. We have our headquarters in San Francisco, and we have the office that I'm working out of here in the North American Support Center. And so there are devices that are assigned to these. And so when you run a device discovery, one of the questions they ask you in the device discovery is, do you want to assign the devices found at this subnet to a specific location? So when you're doing your system setup, we really recommend you kind of chalkboard or whiteboard your organizational arrangement. You identify your locations, create your locations in the system. And then as you start adding your discoveries, you can assign your subnets to both an organization and a location at that moment. That way, when the discoveries run, those fields are pre-populated by Open-Audit, and the system just intelligently starts building out relational connections between what devices belong to what organization at which location, and then user accounts, of course, can also be assigned to organizations. And so users then get interconnected with those devices, which users can see which devices. And in the end, this is all about being able to get you to the point where you could come down here to maps. And this is a feature that's only available, again, in professional and enterprise, is the ability to have this geographic map. So you can come down and open up maps. And it uses a license to Google Maps. You can click on these, and then I can actually drill into this, and I'll get that list of devices. So I can drill in either to the organization, into the address, or into the number of devices. I can see here as well my 4 devices here in the North American Center. I can zoom in, zoom out. I can pan around as far as I want to go. And we can see how this works. All right, that's number 5. Number 4, the organizational pyramid. So I've talked a little bit over the past several top 10 about the concept of organizations or orgs. The organizations in Open-Audit really define both how devices are accessed and also how users get access to information. So defining your organizations can be very, very important. It can be extremely beneficial to you. I have worked with clients who just have everything piled into one default organization. I've also done a great deal of work with clients who very much want to be able to break down and assign devices by, let's say, department. So you might have an overarching or default organization that is your company, or that is perhaps a parent holding organization. And then the next level down might be departments or businesses. And then within departments, you might have groups or roles. And so breaking this down like a pyramid structure with the highest level, either the company or the holding company, the parent organization at the top, breaking down into smaller and smaller, more detailed groups. As devices are added in and assigned to organizations, only people at that organization level or higher can see those devices. Users assigned to org levels below you can't see the devices above them. So this gives you a tremendous amount of control over user access, but also it gives you a tremendous amount of control over being able to sort and parse devices. So for example, I can see that all of my devices in my database, all 93, are assigned to the Automantic default organization. I don't have any in my test org that was created here on January 30th. Number 3 on our top 10, preventing spoofing with blessed subnets. So blessed subnets is actually, it doesn't have a screen, it doesn't have an interface itself. It's actually a configuration setting under Community, Discovery, Configuration. And blessed subnets is available in all 3 levels. So Admin, Community, Discovery, Configuration. And you'll see that we actually have blessed subnets turned off on our demo server. And we do that because it allows us to do demos and do one-off tests, and it allows us to really move a little more fluidly through when we're actually using our demo server for demonstrations or for webinars like this one. What blessed subnets does for you is it says only accept the results of an audit submitted from a subnet that has been approved inside Open-Audit. And the way that a subnet gets added to the blessed subnets list is through creating a discovery. So if you create a discovery for a subnet, Open-Audit will actually add that subnet directly to the list of blessed subnets. However, if you do a discovery on a single individual machine, it will not add the subnet that machine belongs to the list of blessed subnets. And that's one of the reasons why we recommend, if you're going to do a lot of discovering individual machines, so if you go discover, discoveries, discover a single device, if you're going to be doing a lot of discover a single device, turn off, disable blessed subnets while you're doing that. That way the system won't reject an audit result coming back from an individual machine that exists inside a subnet, which may not already be in the list of available subnets. And the reason, the way you know which ones are there, so you can come in and you can simply go into networks, list networks. So a network is added every time a new subnet is scanned. That subnet is added to the list of subnets. And you can see who collected them, who created those pieces, how many devices belong in that subnet, and a quick description of it. You can also, of course, see the size of the subnet. So you have some /30s in here, some /24s. There is a /16 in here, crazy enough. Not quite sure who tried to run a /16 scan. And of course, there's a /8. That's great. All right. For day-to-day operation, we really recommend that blessed subnets be enabled, be set to yes. Again, the whole idea is to prevent someone spoofing the submission of an audit result and pushing an audit result back to Open-Audit. We've done an awful lot of work with scanning through the audit results, making sure that it's that we're hardened against SQL injections from that. But no matter how much of that you do, someone's always a step or two ahead of you. And so again, by restricting what subnets can submit results back to the server will help reduce that kind of opportunity for nefarious conduct with the system. Number 2 on our top 10 list for Open-Audit is configuration management. Now, this this feature is only available in the Enterprise Edition. This is the ability to list baselines. So let's take a look at baselining. What you do with a baseline, you run an audit on a device that you consider to be kind of your gold image, your exemplary example of an installation for I look at one of these Windows Server baselines. You can create a baseline that looks at the netstat table, that looks at the users, the local users on a machine, or looks at the installed server, the installed software rather, excuse me. And what you can do is you can pick one of those three things. In this case, it sounds to be a software audit, and it will make a list of every piece of software on that device, and you can tell baselines whether devices have to have exactly that version number, or that version number or higher, or that version number or lower. When it comes to user accounts, you can load in a set of user accounts and say, I want exactly this set of user accounts and no additional accounts. Or you can set user permissions. So for example, you could do a baseline on user accounts, and you might say, I want to make sure that the default guest account is disabled. And so you can apply that to every machine, and it'll pull that users table and it'll check that setting. And if that setting is wrong, then it'll actually it'll tell you what's up with it. So we can take a look at the results. You can run baselines as often as you want. What we really recommend is that you set it up on a schedule. So for example, you might do your audits of your devices Monday through Friday. On Saturday, you run your baselines, and then Saturday afternoon, you create a series of reports notifying people of what baselines have passed, which ones have failed. And you can see here that we can export this by policy or by device. We can get a plain language list. I can also drill into this, and it'll tell me exactly what machines passed, what machines failed, which ones failed on which types of software. And then I can make a determination if those things are important or if I want to edit my baseline. So as far as baselines go, it's really a kind of a lightweight but extremely powerful configuration monitoring tool for us. A lot of our customers, especially again in the finance, in the energy production category, are using baselines now to be able to monitor their systems for changes where they might not necessarily want to do a live performance and fault monitoring system like NMIS. They can use Open-Audit to run those audits, run a baseline, and then report back on changes to devices, new local user accounts, those types of things. And finally, the number one top 10. And this one gets a lot of debate because it's not really necessarily a custom feature. It is a feature that's available only in professional and enterprise, the ability to schedule tasks. And those can be, you can schedule discoveries, you can schedule the creation of reports. If you have enterprise, you can also schedule baselines. So go discover, discoveries, schedule discoveries. And let's just hit create. You'll see here that you can do schedules, minutes, hours, days a month, days of the week, whether it's enabled or not. But lots of different types of scheduling are available. So you can do a baseline. So you can actually run a baseline whenever you want. You can do a discovery. So you would create a discovery first, and then you could schedule that to run repeatedly. You can create a report, create a query, create a summary, have the results of those emailed. So as long as you've configured the email system under admin email, you can actually have the results of those reports, queries, or summaries emailed out in lots of different formats: CSV, interactive HTML. But the big part, the piece that we really like here again, is just the simple concept of creating scheduled discoveries. The idea that someone come in, they can create their a schedule. In this case, you can see there's a report, software discovered in the last 30 days. It's being run on the 7th day of the month every day, every month of the year. It's going to run at 9:50 server local time. At 9:30 on the 30th day of the month, there's going to be a test run on a discovery. So lots of different things that you can do here with these schedules. A lot of different resources. From a workflow standpoint, generally speaking, what we recommend is that you run your discoveries first. You provide enough time for those to end. You run your baselines next. The baselines, because they're reporting off of data in the database, don't take very long to run at all. After the baselines are done, those create their own reports, and then you create whatever reports, queries, or summaries you need, and have the results of those emailed out to whatever recipients or distribution lists you need. And keeping in mind that you can actually schedule reports, queries, and summaries that are custom ones. So we talked earlier about creating a custom query, creating a custom summary. You can create custom ones and then schedule those to run at certain dates and times. All right, everyone. So that concludes our presentation for today. I'm going to turn off the recording now and then open the floor for questions.